Hello, music lovers, and welcome to the channel. Thanks so much for checking out this video. In this one, I'm going to be talking about Motley Crue. They have just kickstarted the promotional train for their forthcoming biopic, The Dirt, which is based on their legendary 2001 New York Times bestseller of the same name. This movie has been a long time in the making. This is a legendary book. This is one of those books, when you hear about bands coming out with an autobiography, you're like, well, I don't know if I want to read this. I don't know if it's going to have the kind of stuff in there that I want. The dirt. Well, Motley Crue dished the dirt. They actually wrote the book as a group, I think. It was a combination of stories from all of them. Just legendary stuff you can't believe. And it's just been one of these books that you've been waiting for a movie, even wondering if a movie could be made. It's just got so much wild stuff in it. You're wondering, well, what kind of movie company is going to put this out? Who's going to fund this and release it and all that? Finally, after 14 years of wrestling with this film, Motley Crue is about to unleash it on Netflix next month, March the 22nd. So they just put out a couple of things. They put out the trailer for this film and also released the first of 4 brand new tracks that are going to be on the soundtrack. And so in this video, I'm going to go over the trailer. We'll talk about what you can expect from this film. And I'm also going to talk about The Dirt, the new tune, and what that's all about. So let's get started, all right? All right, so the trailer just came out for this film, and it's our first glimpse into, what we can expect. And, as with any trailer, as it was with the Queen film, I remember when that came out, it just looked stunning, and it just got so many people pumped up. The music was great and all that. And for the most part, really, what you saw in that trailer, in retrospect, it did look good, but it didn't tell the whole story by any means. I mean, just by looking at that trailer, we had no idea that they were going to make up so much shit and distort the facts and all this stuff. And so, but that's a trailer's job. It's supposed to hype, and it's supposed to make you just, can't wait to go buy a ticket to go see this movie or do whatever it is that you got to do, buy a soundtrack or do whatever, start listening to more streaming. There's a lot that's built into the hype. When it comes to Motley Crue, this is the kind of film where there's so much stuff, there's so many stories, that the real question is, what are they going to use and how are they going to work it in? How are they going to shock us? And we can tell by looking at this trailer, some things that we can expect. If any band is built for a Hollywood movie, it is Motley Crue. I mean, they've got it all. To say that sex, drugs, and rock and roll is Motley Crue really is an understatement, because there's so much more. And, anyone who has seen this film up to this point, there are some within the industry who have, been able to see this. They are sworn to secrecy. They can't say anything. They can't even say if they like it. I mean, the band wants this under wraps until it airs. And, just by looking at the trailer, we can tell that it's, of course, going to talk about things that we know were major events in the Motley Crue timeline. We do see them at the Starwood, which was their first show. And this was a show where, they began to build their entire reputation of being this notorious live act. In the book, there was a story about how someone, hocked a loogie on Vince Neil, and there was a fight, and Nikki Sixx took his guitar, his bass guitar, and he smashed it over this guy's shoulder blade. And, this is the kind of stuff that we're going to see. We're going to see a lot of fights probably, because there's a lot of them in this book. And in this movie, we're also seeing Pete Davidson. He is, of course, from Saturday Night Live, and he's playing a record executive that helped Motley Crue get their record deal. And one of the things that we notice about him is the way that he's dressed. Very 80s, very, with the striped shirt and everything. And that's one of the things about this film, is that the director, his name is Jeff Tremaine, and he's this guy that did like Jackass and Bad Grandpa, so he's perfect for this film. And he wanted everything to be authentic. as much as possible. Everything you see is going to be right down to the decade, from the cars on the street to the phones and the outfits, and everything is going to be screaming 80s. We also get to see in this film Ozzy Osbourne. He is part of the cast. And Ozzy Osbourne was a big piece of Motley Crue in the early days. You have to keep in mind that Ozzy Osbourne, at this point in his career, he had just lost Randy Rhoads. He was still reeling from that. I mean, Randy Rhoads was, such a big part of Ozzy's early solo career. And when he lost Randy, Ozzy just went crazy. And in this film, we see Motley Crue getting taken under Ozzy's wing, which is basically like, Ozzy was the conductor to their crazy train. They were opening for Ozzy on his Bark at the Moon tour, and Ozzy was doing all kinds of crazy stuff. One of the stories that's in the book is Nikki Sixx partying with Ozzy. They're outside by the pool, and Ozzy, he's run out of cocaine. And so Nikki challenges him to snort a line of ants, which Ozzy gladly accepts. And then, of course, Ozzy is wearing a sundress for whatever reason. He pulls up the sundress and he takes a piss, and then he laps it up like a cat. And then we're not done yet. Then he challenges Nikki. Now, Nikki, of course, is new to this whole thing. He doesn't want to look like a chump, so he's like, all right, sure. So Nikki takes a piss, and before he can lap it up, Ozzy beats him to it. So this is just one of the Ozzy stories that was featured in The Dirt. There's another one where Tommy Lee talks about how Ozzy took a shit in his hotel room and he just like decorated the walls with it. Or I should say he defecated the walls with it. I mean, this is the kind of craziness that Ozzy did. This other story had Vince and Ozzy stealing a car, and then they wound up, crashing. I think they wound up smashing the windows, and they ripped all the upholstery out. I mean, just, high and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And of course, Motley Crue's history is not just filled with crazy stories. There's also some tragedy too. And of course, the trailer hits on the car accident that Vince Neil had with his best friend Razzle. Of course, Razzle was a member of the band Hanoi Rocks, who were the opening band for Motley Crue on their first tour of the US. And Vince and Razzle went on a beer run, and they wound up getting into a car accident which killed Razzle. And also there were a couple of teens in the other car who got brain damage. Their lives were forever ruined. And so Vince had a lot to come to terms with, and so it'll be interesting to see how the movie deals with the tragic side of Motley Crue's career, and, how they make sense of the damage that they did to other people. You know what I mean? Because it's more than just, crazy stories, snorting ants and breaking windows and setting fire to stuff and beating people up. There were consequences of their actions. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle that. We also get to see Tommy Lee marry Heather Locklear. Now, this is something that, it's kind of like you don't know what's more shocking, that Heather Locklear married Tommy Lee or that it lasted for 8 years. I mean, Heather Locklear was like television's darling, this beautiful, clean-cut image, and then she's hanging out with Tommy Lee. I recall at that time, there was a lot of people scratching their heads. She wound up divorcing, like I said, Tommy, after about 8 or so years. And then Tommy eventually met Pamela Anderson, and he married her like 4 days after he met her. And what's interesting is that Pamela Anderson is not in the cast, and she's not going to be in this movie at all, from what I can tell. And because of that, there won't be any mention of the sex tape, that the infamous sex tape, which really kind of kicked off the whole sex tape genre, if that's the way you want to call it, that other people have profited off of and actually used it to further their careers. For Pamela Anderson, it was devastating. She has said, and it was even like recently, she talked about how the whole sex tape thing was embarrassing and it was devastating. And it was one of the reasons why her entire marriage collapsed with Tommy. And so I could see, I haven't heard anything about this specifically, but I could definitely see how Pamela Anderson would not want to get this into the movie, because we live in a time now where if this was in the film, you would have a lot more interest in that sex tape. Who knows, it might even go up for sale again. It, will bring a lot of media and attention to her, asking her about it. And that's not something that she wants to live through again. And I'm not sure if this is something that she had to ask for, or if Tommy Lee was like, look, I don't want to put my family through this. And it's also interesting how they can leave something like this out, and it doesn't affect anything. There's still so much stuff to pull from that it's like you could leave out the fact that you kicked off the whole sex tape genre. And let's just cut that right out. We got plenty more to go, including we got Mick Mars, who was probably the most sane of the entire band. He doesn't have nearly the amount of crazy stories as the other guys, but Mick's another tragic story. Mick has a chronic spinal condition that it has turned his spine into like concrete, like it's seizing up, and it's actually taken inches off of his height. And it's something that he's had to deal with over the past number of years. Some of the guys in Motley Crue have talked about how it has contributed to their decision to doing a farewell tour and just calling it quits. Mick Mars has called bullshit on that. He says that that's not the reason. And then again, there are other things to point to where the band were just simply not getting along. I mean, when that final tour ended, they basically stopped talking to one another until they got back to do these new songs. So it's really hard to say what's going on with these guys. But definitely Mick has had his share of issues too. I know that after they did the farewell tour, Mick was working on a solo album down in Nashville, but there hasn't been any talk of that album, or there really hasn't been a lot of talk about Nick. So I hope he's doing all right, and Mick has always been a solid guitar player. I think he's an underrated guitar player. He's made Motley Crue sound like they've got two guitar players. He's just really, really solid. He's got great riffs. Always admired him. And the trailer also shows Nikki Sixx overdosing on heroin. That was a major event. I mean, it actually killed him. It was reported in the news that Nikki Sixx died. They were actually holding a vigil for him that I think he walked up to. They were able to get him back, and he claims to have had this outer body experience that he knows sounds crazy, but he really feels like something happened to him when he had passed on. And what's really odd about this is that, when he did come back to life, you would think that this would have maybe scared him straight, but he went home and he shot up again, and so, I can't believe that I'm talking about this so far into this video, but that just goes to show you how much stuff there is that, everybody's got a story here. Everybody has got a piece of this pie, and it's going to be interesting how they tell it. And I've heard one account, somebody who claims to have seen an early draft of the script, is that it's not going to be a chronological story. It's going to be told from various band members, and it's going to jump back and forth. I don't know if that's what they're going to keep for the final. We'll have to see. There's just so much ground to cover with these guys. And then the biggest tragedy out of this whole book, out of this whole movie, is going to be Vince Neil losing his daughter Skylar at age 4 to cancer. This was back in the mid-90s, so it's been over 20 years that this has happened. It devastated Neil. It took him many years to get over. And of course, we see that in this trailer. And of course, after all the talk about what stories are going to be in this film, we haven't even gotten to the music yet. This is going to have a really good soundtrack, kind of like the Queen movie. It was one of the saving graces of the Queen film, was that at least the soundtrack kept you going, you know, and I think the same can be said for the Motley Crue movie. So many great tunes are going to be here. The band recently went into the studio. They recorded 4 brand new songs with Bob Rock for the Dirt soundtrack album. Bob Rock is the one who produced Dr. Feelgood. He's a great producer, and you know, he helps to keep the band locked into their vision. You know, you got 4 guys here who are all over the place. They all have a common goal. They want to make a great song. And what a great producer like Bob Rock does is he helps to sort through the bullshit, and he helps these guys see their vision through. And I think that he did a really good job on this tune. To me, the tune that we just got, The Dirt, is old school Crue. You know, it's got a pulsing rhythm. It actually starts off like Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, it sounds like Freddy's theme. It's got some horror stuff going on, and you can see why, after the stuff that I've been talking to you about here, their story is like a horror story. The lyrics are reflective, pulling on a lot of things from their past. They're often filthy, and the rhythms are driving, and the guitars are just, you know, heavy and great riffs. The chorus is catchy. It's very, very Crue. You've got Machine Gun Kelly, who plays Tommy Lee, who in real life is a rapper. He's on this. And when they invited him onto this song, Machine Gun Kelly made it clear that he did not want to rap on it because he didn't want to ruin the Motley Crue image. He knew that the fans would probably not go for it. And so I think that he laid down a very cool, I guess what they call a chant rap. He kind of almost like talks his way through it, and he wrote the lyrics. And I think the whole thing came out very, very good. I think the tune fits perfectly into the Motley Crue catalog. Now, one of the brand new songs that I'm wondering about is this cover of Like a Virgin by Madonna. That's one of the 4 new tracks, and it's something that Nikki Sixx came up with. He just had this crazy idea, a way to present it. It supposedly is a very heavy version of it. And when he played it for Tommy Lee, you know, he had to actually leave the room because he didn't know if Tommy Lee was going to, you know, give him a shot to the head. But Tommy Lee loved it, and so they went with it. So be interesting to see how that turns out. But this movie, like I said, it has been in the works for about 14 years. And they were going to go with Paramount. Paramount is the same company that put out the Queen movie, and they're going to be putting out the Elton John movie. And what's interesting is that Paramount wanted to put out a version of the movie that was a bit more sanitized than what Motley Crue wanted. You know, they were not on board with some of the scenes. I'm not saying that they didn't want to make it an R-rated movie. They probably did, but Motley Crue really wanted to push the boundaries, and they wanted to push it further than Paramount was willing to go. And where Paramount lost, Netflix won. They told Motley Crue, look, you can do the movie with us, and we won't, you know, do the movie that you think suits your audience and whatever you want to do. And so the band went with it. And from what I understand, the movie is going to open up with this really filthy scene. Now, I've heard about this before, and if it's what I think it is, it should be pretty filthy. From what I understand, the movie is going to start off with a squirting scene. And I'm not just saying this, pulling it out of the air. This is a story that was in the book, and it was also referenced in an interview with Rolling Stone late last year. They talked about this squirting scene, you know, opening up the film. And according to the book, Tommy Lee is with a groupie and Nikki Sixx is in the room. And let's just say Nikki Sixx intercepts the incoming. Okay, let's just leave it at that. All right, so you can figure out the rest. Of course, this is just my opinion based on what I've heard, but I do know for a fact, this is according to an interview with Nikki Sixx, that the movie does start with a very filthy scene. So we'll see what happens there. You know, there's so many stories from this book, The Dirt, that we don't know what's going to be included, what's going to be left out. You know, like for instance, are we going to see Bullwinkle? You know, Bullwinkle was, I think it was Tommy's girlfriend. Of course, that was a nickname given to her based on her appearance, but apparently they had a rocky relationship. No pun intended, or maybe it was. She had anger issues. She threw like a fire extinguisher through their apartment window. Are we going to see the scene where Vince Neil buys Coke from a drag queen only to figure out that it's baby powder? How about Nikki Sixx nailing some guy's earlobe to a table? Are we going to see that? Are we going to see Nikki Sixx hitting on Tommy's mom? Apparently, he had a thing for her. How about the time where the band was getting some shit from a policeman, so they went outside and they collectively pissed in the cop's car? And also there's a story about Tommy Lee and Nikki Sixx breaking bottles over each other's heads and swallowing small light bulbs. Yes, kids, this is your brain on drugs. Then one thing that I think might be shown in the trailer is the band setting a hotel on fire. This is something that they did to Tommy Lee. They set his room on fire when they were in Switzerland. And there's also a story in the book about Nikki Sixx. He got so high that his dealer had to beat him with a baseball bat to wake him up. And then, you know, I think the Girls, Girls, Girls tour was like the most off the chain. That period of 86, 87 was, you know, especially for Nikki Sixx, just off the rails. But Tommy Lee and Mick Mars had their, you know, stories too. During the Girls, Girls, Girls tour, there was a story in the book about Tommy Lee. When he was doing phone interviews, he would be vomiting and he would be pissing in the hotel room. And there was also the story about Mick Mars when he was laying down the guitar lick for Girls, Girls, Girls. He actually passed out and they kept that take. That's what's on the album. So anyway, I think you get a sense of what's going on here. There's so many stories. What's going to be left in? What's going to be left out? How are they going to tell this? How are they going to tell all these crazy stories and yet give it a human element? I know that Nikki Sixx, you know, he regrets a lot of the stuff that he did a long, long time ago. He even wrote his own book, The Heroin Diaries, which is a book that he would later put to music. That's one of the reasons why his band 6 a.m. came to be. He got with a couple of people and there was talk about, you know, making each chapter of the book a song. And so, and there's been a lot of people that have come up to Nikki when he would go to his book signings and they would tell him how much he has helped them get off the junk, you know. So I kind of get the sense that this isn't going to be just a story about how crazy they are and, you know, aren't we cool? There's going to be a human side. It'd be interesting to see how they bring that all in. And, you know, this is something, like I said, that we're going to come to expect. I talked about this with the Queen film. We're going to start seeing a lot more bands wanting to get their story on the big screen. This is a way for them to reshape their legacy. It's best that they do it while they're alive. Otherwise, you know, once they're gone, somebody else is going to tell their story. What I'm trying to say here is that this is going to set off a trend. This is going to be a very, very popular movie. I have no doubt about it. And it's also going to be interesting to see the avenue that bands go down, because they know that if the major companies like Paramount are not going to put the movie out, Netflix will pretty much put anything out. And so who knows what options bands are going to have. So I want to know what you think. What do you think about the trailer for The Dirt? What do you think about the book? All right. What do you think about the new tune, The Dirt? Let me know what you think about Motley Crue. Check out my companion playlist for this video. I've got a bunch of clips that I have put into a playlist that are related to Motley Crue and The Dirt. I will put that in a link above so you can check that out. So yeah, be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button too, all right? And I will talk to you soon in another video.